Daniel Hayes lived alone on the edge of the Arizona frontier, far away from the noise of towns and the busy roads where wagons passed. His ranch stood between wide-open fields and tall desert hills that glowed orange every time the sun went down. Most days, the only things Daniel heard were the cries of distant hawks or the soft steps of his horse as it walked around the corral. He was a hard-working man, honest and quiet, and he rarely complained about anything. But loneliness had slowly made a home inside him. He would sometimes sit outside in the late evenings, staring at the endless land around him and wondering if this was all life had left for him. One afternoon, when the sun was bright and the air was almost too warm to breathe, Daniel was fixing a broken water trough near the barn. He had just tightened the last wooden plank when he heard something unusual. It wasn't wind, and it wasn't his animals. It was a deep, steady rhythm, hoofbeats, many of them, coming closer. Daniel stood up slowly, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked toward the dusty trail that led from the hills. A long line of Apache riders appeared in the shimmering light. Their horses moved calmly, and in front of them rode Chief Tahoma, a respected leader known for his wisdom and fairness. Daniel felt a mix of surprise and confusion. He had no problem with the Apache people, and they had no problem with him. They often passed near his land, and Daniel always treated them with respect. But he had never seen this many riders coming toward his home. He took a few steps forward and waited, trying to hide the uneasiness he felt. When the riders reached the clearing near the barn, the chief raised a hand and everyone stopped. The dust slowly settled. Chief Tahoma stepped down from his horse with a slow, steady motion, his expression calm and unreadable. Daniel spoke first because he didn't know what else to do. "Good afternoon, Chief. Is everything all right?" The chief nodded. "All is well, Daniel Hayes. We come not for trouble." Daniel felt a small breath of relief, but he remained puzzled. "Then, how can I help you?" Chief Tahoma looked around the ranch for a moment, as if checking whether the place was safe. Then he turned his eyes back to Daniel. "You helped one of my people some weeks ago, a young boy with an injured leg." Daniel remembered. He had been checking his cattle when he found a small Apache boy sitting alone by a fallen tree. The boy had been hurt by a loose rock slide. Daniel had lifted him onto his horse, brought him home, cleaned the wound, and given him food and water. Later that evening, Apache riders had arrived and taken the boy back, thanking Daniel politely. To Daniel, it was nothing more than what any decent person would do. "I didn't do much," Daniel said. "Anyone would have helped him." The chief shook his head. "Not anyone. The world is not always kind. You were." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Chief Tahoma then turned to the riders behind him and gave a quiet signal. 3 tall women stepped forward. Daniel's eyes widened without meaning to. These women were unlike anyone he had ever seen. They were sisters, clearly related in their features, but each had a different presence. Their height was the first thing someone would notice. They were taller than most men Daniel had met, standing straight and strong. They carried themselves with dignity, their expressions calm but observing everything around them. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had no idea why they were here. Chief Tahoma gestured toward them. "These are the daughters of a brave Apache warrior. Their father protected our people until his final breath. Their mother left this world after a long sickness. They have only each other now." Daniel nodded softly, feeling sympathy, but not understanding the reason they stood in front of him. The chief continued. "The tribe must protect them, but the world outside has changed. There are men who see strength and height, not with respect but with desire or greed. We needed someone honest, someone who would treat them with dignity and keep them safe." Daniel felt a strange feeling in his stomach, something between nervousness and confusion. He still didn't understand what this had to do with him. Chief Tahoma stepped closer, his voice steady. We chose you, Daniel Hayes. Daniel blinked. Chose me? For what? The chief spoke firmly, without hesitation. You will be their husband. Daniel almost stepped back. The air around him seemed to stop moving. He stared at the chief, then at the sisters, then back at the chief again. He could not believe what he had heard. His voice came out quiet and unsure. Chief, I think there's been a mistake. I'm not looking for a wife. And certainly not. The chief raised a hand gently. This is not a command. It is an offer. A bond of protection and unity. The sisters need a safe home. You need a family. Our people believe this path may help all of you. Daniel felt overwhelmed. His life had always been simple, predictable. He had never imagined anyone choosing him for something like this. He looked at the sisters again. They stood respectfully, not forcing him, not speaking, only waiting to hear his response. I'm just a rancher, Daniel said quietly. I live alone. My life is plain. I don't know if I can take care of anyone except my animals. Chief Tahoma nodded slowly. You already take care of strangers without expectation. That is enough proof. Daniel didn't know how to argue with that. He felt his heart beating faster. He wasn't scared of the sisters, but he was scared of this sudden responsibility. A whole future seemed to appear in front of him, and he had no idea how to handle it. Seeing Daniel's confusion, the chief placed a hand on his shoulder, a strong but calm gesture. They will stay in your barn tonight. No decisions must be made today. A man should think before he speaks a final word. Daniel swallowed hard. In my barn? The chief nodded. It is safe, and they will not disturb you. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. All right, just for tonight? The sisters walked toward the barn quietly, moving with care, as if they didn't want to cause him any more worry than he already felt. Daniel watched them go, still not sure what was happening. They entered the barn and settled inside respectfully, saying nothing, only offering a small polite glance as they passed. Chief Tahoma mounted his horse again. We will return in the morning, Daniel Hayes. Your heart will guide your choice. The riders turned and left slowly, disappearing into the sinking sun. Daniel stood in the yard long after they were gone. The sky turned gold, then red, then deep blue as stars began to appear. The ranch that had always felt empty now held 3 strangers, 3 sisters who the tribe believed should become part of his life. He went inside his house and sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He could not understand why fate had chosen him. He had never been a remarkable man. He wasn't rich, he wasn't powerful, and he had no special position. Yet the tribe trusted him. They believed he would do the right thing. That thought stayed with him the entire night. He lay down later, but he didn't sleep much. Each time he closed his eyes, he imagined the sisters in the barn, their calm faces, their respectful silence, their uncertain futures. He wondered what they thought of him. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. He wondered how one simple act of kindness toward a hurt boy had led to something so big. The night passed slowly, and Daniel remained awake, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, trying to understand the path that had suddenly opened in front of him. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. When the sun rose the next morning, Daniel woke up with a heavy mind. He had barely slept, and the strange feeling from the night before still followed him. He stepped outside, hoping the cool air would clear his thoughts. The sky was soft blue, the land quiet except for birds singing near the barn. Daniel looked toward the barn doors, knowing the 3 sisters were inside. For a long time, he simply stood there, unsure how to approach them. He wasn't afraid of them. They seemed gentle and respectful, but he felt nervous about saying the wrong thing or making the situation uncomfortable. He took a slow breath and finally walked toward the barn. When he pushed the door open, the sisters stood up politely as if they had been waiting for him. They were taller than him, taller than most men he had ever seen, but their posture and eyes showed kindness, not pride or force. Daniel nodded awkwardly, trying to find the right words. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but unsure. The eldest sister stepped forward. Her expression carried a quiet strength. "Good morning, Daniel Hayes," she replied. Her voice was steady and respectful. "I am Nayeli." The second sister bowed her head slightly. "I am Asha." The youngest gave a small, shy smile. "My name is Kiona." Daniel repeated their names softly, trying not to show how nervous he felt. "I didn't know if you slept well." "We rested safely," Nayeli said. "Your barn is warm and peaceful." Daniel felt a small relief. "I'm glad." He paused, unsure what to say next. "You must be hungry. I can make breakfast." The sisters glanced at each other. Asha spoke first. "We will help." Daniel didn't know how to argue, so he agreed. They followed him to the small kitchen beside the house. He felt strange being watched by 3 tall women while he prepared simple food. But then, without asking, Kiona softly rolled up her sleeves and began cutting vegetables with careful precision. Asha took the heavy pot from Daniel's hands as if it weighed nothing, placing it on the stove. Nayeli fetched water and added spices with the grace of someone used to cooking for many people. Within minutes, the kitchen felt different, fuller, warmer, more alive than it had in years. Daniel watched quietly as they worked together without confusion or noise, like they had done this all their lives. It surprised him. It also comforted him. When breakfast was ready, they all sat around the small wooden table. Daniel felt shy, as if he were sitting with guests more important than himself. But the sisters ate with calm gratitude, not acting superior or demanding. After a few minutes, Nayeli placed her bowl down and gently asked, "Daniel Hayes, do you understand why the chief brought us here?" Daniel hesitated, unsure whether he should speak honestly, but he finally said, "I know he believes you need safety. I know he thinks I'm the right person to provide it. But I don't understand why me. I'm just a rancher." Asha leaned forward slightly. "The world outside our tribe has become dangerous. Some people try to take advantage of those who look different. Some try to use others for work or strength. Our father protected us from such people. But after he passed, the tribe feared someone would try to separate us or use us." Kiona lowered her eyes. "We did not want to be separated. We are sisters. We only have each other." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. Their voices held no drama, no demands, only truth. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for what you've been through." Nayeli continued. "The tribe respects you. They have watched you for years. You never harm anyone. You help the injured boy without expecting anything. You live with honesty. That is why they chose you." Daniel felt heat rise in his face. He wasn't used to receiving compliments. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what felt right." "That is what makes you the right man," Asha said plainly. Daniel didn't know how to respond. He shifted awkwardly. "But the chief, he said something about me becoming your husband." The sisters exchanged glances, showing no embarrassment. It was Nayeli who spoke again. "The chief offered the idea because he believes in building bonds that protect both sides. But we do not expect you to accept us. We do not force anything. The tribe only wanted us to be near someone who is good." Kiona added softly, "You have a choice. We also have a choice. Nothing should happen without agreement." Daniel felt some of his fear fade. For the first time, he understood the situation more clearly. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a command. It was simply an option. a possibility the tribe believed in because of respect, not force. After breakfast, Daniel took them outside to show them the ranch. At first, he expected they would simply watch, but the moment he picked up a few heavy tools, Asha stepped beside him and lifted them with ease. "Let me help," she said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Daniel stared, amazed at her strength. She carried fence posts that usually took him 2 trips. Meanwhile, Nayeli noticed loose boards near the chicken coop. She knelt down and began repairing them without being asked. She handled the tools carefully, working quietly and efficiently. Kiona wandered to the fields, looking at the soil, touching the dry ground, studying the shape of the clouds. When Daniel approached, she explained, "It will rain tomorrow. The air is heavy, and the clouds build from the west side of the hills." Daniel would never have guessed. Her observation impressed him. The rest of the morning passed like that. The ranch, which usually felt heavy with work, suddenly felt lighter. They moved with a natural instinct, offering help wherever needed. Daniel found himself smiling more than usual. He didn't feel like he was hosting strangers. He felt like he was working beside people who understood teamwork. At midday, they all sat under a large tree for rest. A soft breeze passed over the land. The sisters shared stories from their childhood, how their father taught them to climb cliffs, how their mother taught them songs, and how the 3 of them always slept close so they would never feel alone. Daniel listened closely, feeling something warm in his chest. He realized how strong they were, not only in body, but in heart. They had survived loss, fear, and uncertainty, yet they carried no bitterness. Later, when Daniel offered to show them the storage shed where old ranch supplies were kept, Asha laughed lightly and said, "Daniel Hayes, you treat us like guests. We are used to work. Show us the hardest tasks first." Daniel couldn't help smiling. "All right, let's see what you can do." They surprised him again. Asha lifted a stuck gate Daniel had struggled with for months. Nayeli organized tools and supplies better than Daniel ever had. Kiona sorted ropes, buckets, and planks like she'd been living on the ranch for years. At one point, Daniel stopped and looked around. His ranch didn't feel quiet or lonely anymore. It felt alive. The sisters filled the space with calm energy, teamwork, and gentle presence. In the evening, after all the work was done, Daniel prepared supper, and the sisters helped again. After the meal, they returned to the barn, still respecting the boundary Daniel had kept. They didn't step into his personal space, and they didn't ask for more than he offered. They simply thanked him for the food and the day's work. Before closing the barn door, Nayeli said softly, "We will not pressure you, Daniel Hayes. Whatever choice you make, we will accept it." Asha added, "But know this, you are a good man. Our tribe does not trust easily. They trust you." Kiona gave a small smile. "Tomorrow may bring clarity." Daniel stood by the barn long after they stepped inside. Their words stayed with him, circling in his mind. He had expected them to be uncertain, frightened, or demanding. But instead, they had been patient, respectful, and kind. They had shown him who they truly were through their actions, not their words. He walked back to his small house as the stars began to appear. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The ranch felt different now, warmer, stronger. As he lay in bed that night, he thought of the sisters working with him, speaking honestly, and trusting him with their truth. He realized something quietly, something he didn't admit even to himself at first. He didn't want them to leave, and that simple thought changed everything inside him. The next few days passed in a way Daniel never expected. Life on the ranch, once quiet and lonely, slowly turned into something full of energy, movement, and a strange, warm comfort he hadn't felt in years. Daniel found himself waking earlier, working harder, and even smiling without realizing it. The three sisters had become part of his daily routine so naturally that he sometimes wondered how he had ever managed the ranch alone. Every morning began the same. Daniel would walk outside with his coffee, and the sisters would already be awake, standing near the barn or by the corral, waiting to see how they could help. They never waited lazily. They stood with purpose, like people who understood discipline and teamwork. One morning, Asha was helping move heavy wooden beams that Daniel had planned to reposition. She lifted them as if they weighed nothing. Daniel walked over quickly, worried she might injure herself, but when she saw his concern, she gave him a steady look and said calmly, "Daniel Hayes, strength is not trouble for me. Let me do this." Daniel nodded and stepped back, though he still kept an eye on her. She moved with careful control, never reckless, never showing off. Daniel started to respect her strong will more and more. Naily, the eldest, spent most mornings checking the ranch supplies, repairing small things before they became bigger problems. She fixed loose hinges, tightened ropes, and even mended a torn saddle with skill Daniel didn't know she had. He admired her calm nature. When she worked, there was no noise, no rush, just steady hands and quiet focus. Kiona, the youngest, often walked near the fields, studying the plants and the soil. Daniel once found her kneeling beside a patch of dry ground, touching the dirt gently with her fingertips. When he asked what she was doing, she responded, "Earth speaks if you listen. The soil is thirsty. The next rain will help. But we should dig channels so the water spreads evenly." Daniel didn't even think about rain until she mentioned it, and he realized again how observant she was. One afternoon, Daniel took the sisters out to the far edge of the ranch to repair a fence damaged by wild animals. On the way, they spoke about simple things: how the wind from the mountains carried different scents, how the land changed color depending on the time of day, how peaceful the ranch felt compared to the busy trails settlers used. Daniel felt strange comfort hearing their voices around him. Each sister spoke differently. Nayeli slow and thoughtful, Asha bold and direct, and Kiona gentle and curious. When they reached the fence, Daniel began gathering tools, but Asha was already pulling up the broken posts. Daniel shook his head lightly. "You don't need to do everything, you know." Asha looked at him with a hint of humor. "But I want to help, and you have too much work for one man." Daniel laughed softly. "That's true." Together they repaired the fence faster than Daniel could have imagined. Nayeli held the posts straight while Daniel hammered them into the ground. Kiona tied the wires with quick, clever hands. Asha lifted new planks and kept the heavy materials steady. When they finished, Daniel stepped back and admired the work. "This looks better than before," he said. Nayeli smiled at him. "A family's work is always stronger when done together." Daniel felt a warm pull in his chest at the word family. He didn't respond, but the word stayed in his mind. Later that afternoon, as they walked back to the ranch, they saw dust rising in the distance. Daniel narrowed his eyes, uneasy. A group of settlers on horseback approached, loud and careless. Daniel recognized the type. Men who drank too much, talked too loud, and caused trouble wherever they went. The kind of men who didn't respect anyone, especially not Apache people. Daniel stopped walking, and the sisters slowed behind him. The men rode closer, laughing among themselves. When they noticed the sisters, their laughter changed. They stared too openly, whispering things to each other. Daniel felt tension rise inside him. He stepped forward and kept his voice steady. "Is something you need, boys?" One of them smirked. "Didn't know you had company, Hayes. And tall company at that." Another leaned forward in his saddle. "Where'd you find these giant women? Never seen anything like 'em." Daniel felt anger spark, but he held his ground. They're guests on this ranch. Show some respect." The men exchanged looks, clearly amused by Daniel's calm warning. One of them laughed and said, "Relax, Hayes. We're just admiring." Daniel moved closer, blocking their view of the sisters. I said, "Show respect. Then move on." The men stared at him, surprised by the firmness in his voice. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the first man shrugged carelessly. Fine, keep your temper. We're leaving anyway." They turned their horses around, laughing again, but less boldly now. Dust rose behind them as they rode off across the land. Daniel let out a slow breath. He turned to see the sisters watching him silently. Nayeli stepped forward first. "Thank you, Daniel Hayes. You stood for us." Asha nodded firmly. Most men would pretend not to hear. Kiona's eyes were soft. "You did not let them speak wrongly to us." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly shy. "I don't like disrespect. Not on my land." Nayeli spoke gently. "That is why the chief trusted you." They returned to the ranch in thoughtful silence. Daniel didn't speak about the moment again, but inside, something had changed. The sisters now saw him not only as a protector, but as someone who would treat them with honor. The following evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, Chief Tahoma returned with a small group of riders. They approached the ranch calmly, without urgency. Daniel walked out to greet them, unsure of the reason for their visit. The chief dismounted and approached. "Daniel Hayes," he said, "I have come to hear how my daughters are treated." Daniel felt nervous, even though he knew he had done nothing wrong. He glanced at the sisters, who stepped forward confidently. Nayeli spoke first. "Daniel Hayes has treated us with kindness and fairness. We work together. He protects us." Asha added, "He does not shout, he does not order, he works beside us." Kiona smiled softly. "He listens." Chief Tahoma nodded slowly, satisfaction visible in his eyes. He turned to Daniel. "You see, our trust was not misplaced." Daniel raised his hand slightly. "Chief, I don't know if I'm the man you think I am." "I'm still unsure about everything." The chief looked at him closely. "Uncertainty does not mean weakness. It means you think before acting. That is a wise trait." Daniel didn't know how to respond. The chief continued. "The tribe hopes you will consider the bond we offered, not because of debt, not because of duty, but because we believe unity brings strength." Daniel felt the sisters' eyes on him, but none of them pressured him. They simply waited quietly, respecting his thoughts. He looked down at the ground, then back at them. "I care about your daughters. I respect them. But becoming what you ask, it's a big decision." Chief Tahoma nodded, "And one you must make with a clear heart." After the tribe returned to the hills, Daniel stood alone outside, watching the barn where the sisters stayed. Their silhouettes moved inside as they prepared for rest. He could hear their soft voices, their quiet laughter, the gentle rhythm of people who felt safe. He realized he was no longer imagining life alone. Instead, he kept imagining life with them, working together, sharing meals, building a home filled with energy instead of silence. He didn't know when it happened or how, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer torn because of fear. He was torn because he cared too much. The sisters had become part of his everyday world, and deep inside, Daniel wondered if this unexpected path was the one he was meant to follow after all. The night after the chief's visit felt heavier than the ones before. Daniel lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling while the warm desert wind moved softly through the open window. Normally, the quiet of the ranch helped him sleep, but tonight his thoughts were louder than any noise outside. He kept thinking about the chief's words, the sisters' kindness, and the strange new feeling growing inside him. He remembered when the ranch used to feel empty. Days blended together and nights felt long, But now, the ranch felt different. There was movement, warmth, and laughter that echoed through the open land. Daniel hadn't realized how much he had missed the feeling of being part of something bigger than himself. As he thought, he remembered the way Nayeli spoke with calm wisdom, the way Asha worked boldly without fear, and the way Kiona smiled shyly whenever she talked about the land and the sky. They weren't just living on his ranch, they were becoming a part of its heartbeat. And Daniel couldn't deny that life felt fuller with them there. He finally fell asleep close to dawn, and when he woke, the sunlight was already shining through the window. The sound of faint voices came from outside, soft voices, gentle laughter. He knew the sisters were awake. Daniel washed his face, took a slow breath, and stepped outside. The sisters were near the well, drawing water into buckets. They greeted him with warm smiles. Daniel smiled back, feeling both nervous and peaceful at the same time. After breakfast, Daniel felt he needed a quiet moment, so he went to the corral and leaned against the fence. He watched his horse walk lazily in circles. He didn't hear the soft footsteps behind him until Nayeli spoke. "Daniel Hayes," she said gently, "you are thinking deeply today." Daniel turned to her and gave a small, honest smile. "I've been thinking a lot these days." Nayeli studied him with calm eyes. "Whatever choice your heart leans toward, we will accept it." Her words were soft, but they carried strength. Daniel looked down at his hands. "I don't want to make a choice that hurts any of you." Nayeli stepped closer, her voice steady. "We are not afraid of choices. We have survived loss and fear before. What we want now is a place where we can live with peace and respect. You have already given us that." Daniel didn't know how to answer. He felt something warm spread through his chest, a feeling he couldn't ignore anymore. The rest of the morning passed with simple chores. Asha helped move heavy sacks of feed, Kiona watered the plants and checked the sky again for signs of weather changes, and Nayeli repaired an old wooden stool that Daniel thought was beyond saving. Watching them work made Daniel realize how much life they had brought into the ranch. By midday, Daniel knew he could not hide from the decision any longer. He needed to speak with them, honestly, openly, and without hesitation. After the noon meal, he asked them to sit with him outside under the large tree that stood in the middle of the ranch. The sisters sat quietly, waiting for him to speak. Daniel felt his heart beat faster, but he forced himself to meet their eyes. "I want to say this clearly," he began slowly. "You three have changed this ranch. Not with force, not with demands, but with kindness. You work hard, you respect my home, and you bring something I didn't know I was missing." The sisters listened without interrupting. Daniel continued, "When the chief first brought you here, I was shocked. I didn't understand anything. I was afraid of making a wrong choice. But these last days, I have seen who you are. You're strong, brave, gentle, honest. I don't feel like you're guests anymore. I feel like you're already part of my life." Nayeli's eyes softened. Asha leaned forward slightly, listening closely. Kiona held her hands together in her lap, waiting for his next words. Daniel looked at all three of them. "I won't lie to you. I'm still not perfect. I still don't know if I'm the kind of man the chief believes I am. But I know one thing. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay here. I want us to build a life together. Not because the tribe said so, not because I owe anyone anything, but because I choose this. I choose you." The sisters exchanged a quiet look, one filled with relief, respect, and a deep understanding. Nayeli spoke first. "Daniel Hayes, you honor us with your honesty." Asha nodded firmly. "We do not want to leave. This ranch feels like home." Kiona smiled shyly. "We feel safe with you." Daniel felt tension leave his body like a warm wave. He hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding his fears. Now, everything felt clearer. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, the chief and a few tribe members returned. They approached the ranch calmly, as they always did. Daniel stepped forward, meeting the chief with steady eyes. The chief looked at him with a question forming in his gaze. "Daniel Hayes," he said, "have you found your answer?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, I have." The chief waited. Daniel spoke clearly. "I choose to welcome your daughters into my life. I choose to protect them, work with them, and build a future together. Not from pressure, not from debt, but because my heart tells me this is right." The chief closed his eyes briefly, as if offering silent thanks to the world around him. Then he opened them again. "Your answer is wise and honest," he said. "You do not accept out of fear or duty. You accept out of unity." The sisters stepped beside Daniel, their calm presence adding strength to the moment. The chief placed a hand gently on each daughter's shoulder, then on Daniel's. "Tonight," the chief said, "we will hold a simple ceremony, not for show, not for force, but for joining hearts and lives with respect." The ceremony was peaceful, quiet, and filled with meaning. It took place outside, under the wide desert sky. The tribe formed a small circle, and Daniel stood between the three sisters. They exchanged simple words, words that promised protection, teamwork, trust, and companionship. There were no loud celebrations, only soft singing, warm firelight, and the steady beat of drums that echoed with calm energy across the open land. After the ceremony, many tribe members returned to their camp, leaving behind warm blessings. The sisters stayed with Daniel, walking through the ranch under the gentle moonlight. They looked around the land that now belonged to all of them together. Daniel felt the weight of loneliness fall away completely. The ranch was no longer a quiet place lost in the middle of nowhere. It was a home, alive, strong, and filled with people who truly cared for each other. In the following days, a new rhythm formed on the ranch. Daniel and the sisters worked as a team. Kiona organized the planting fields, Nayeli planned repairs and supplies, and Asha took on heavy work with confidence. Daniel felt the ranch growing stronger than it had ever been. He also noticed something deeper. The sisters weren't just helping the ranch, they were helping him. They spoke to him with kindness, laughed with him during meals, and listened when he shared stories about his past. He grew to trust them more each day, and they trusted him in return. Weeks passed, and the ranch became a place of harmony. The tribe visited often, helping with larger tasks or bringing supplies. The settlers who once caused trouble stayed far away after seeing the unity of the ranch and tribe working together. Every evening, when the sun painted the land orange and the sky softened into twilight, Daniel looked at the barn, the place where everything began. He remembered how afraid he was that first night. Now, he couldn't imagine life without the sisters' presence, their voices, and their gentle strength. Daniel often stood outside in the cool evening air, watching them laugh or work nearby, and every time he looked at them, he felt grateful for the unexpected path that had entered his life. What began as confusion and fear became the greatest blessing he had ever known. A new family, a stronger home, and a future filled with unity, trust, and peace.